Late March draped Boston in mist. Fine raindrops fell on the patchy sidewalks, scattering the reflections of streetlights, creating the quiet rhythm Olivia Bennet always called the breathing of a sleepless city. She stepped out the back door of Mercy Hospital, clutching a paper cup of coffee, long gone cold. 2 a.m. A 16-hour shift had just ended, leaving behind a heavy exhaustion that made her want to collapse right there in the parking lot. A gust of cold wind swept through, tossing her damp hair against her cheeks. Olivia pulled up the collar of her white coat and inhaled the night's damp air. She never got used to this feeling, the emptiness after every emergency shift, when the sounds of life faded into the hush of ventilators. An 8-year-old boy with a broken arm, a middle-aged man whose heart stopped, a mother crying hoarsely outside the operating room. Each left behind fragments inside her imprints that could never be washed away. She unlocked her old Honda, parked in the corner. Everything seemed normal until she heard something low, urgent, in a language that wasn't English. A strange rhythm, drawn-out syllables, and one word that cut through the rain bratva. Olivia froze. Boston nights were usually still, so that sound tore through the air like a crack. She turned. A dim yellow light reflected off the surface of a black van parked near the side gate. 2 No-3 men stood there, broad-shouldered in long coats, their movements sharp cold. One of them drew a gun. Olivia's heart seized. She didn't think she just dropped behind a delivery truck, breath ragged, the pounding in her chest so loud she feared it would give her away. Then came the gunfire, clean, sharp, terrifyingly precise. 1 shot, 2, then a burst. The scent of gunpowder mixed with rain clogging her throat. She covered her mouth, trembling. Her phone slipped from her pocket screen, flashing twice. That flash, brief but bright, was enough to turn her into a witness to something she was never meant to see. She didn't remember how she ran out of the parking lot, only that her hand clenched the car key so tight it drew blood, and the engine roared to life amid her gasping sobs. She sped into the storm, the streetlights stretching behind her like trails of red, like veins of blood. Her small Beacon Street apartment was dark. She slammed the door, dropped her bag, and leaned against the wall, heart racing. On her cracked phone screen, the photo app was open, 3 blurry picture ears, but clear enough to show the faces of the men who had just killed someone. Blood, black coats, silver guns, a man falling. Then silence. She gagged, shaking uncontrollably. Never before had the world felt so fragile, as a thin line between saving a life and witnessing death. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Miss Bennet. This is Agent Davis, FBI. We need to speak with you immediately. Don't hang up. You're in danger. She stared at the screen, mind blank. How did they know her name? How did they know what she'd seen? An hour later, she sat in an FBI interrogation room. 3 men in black suits, harsh white light. Agent Davis's voice was low and firm. You saw 6 people die. One of them was a mid-level Mafia boss, the Russian mafia. You took pictures. And you're the only living witness. Olivia bit her lip. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to go home. You don't have a home anymore, said the woman across from her, her tone soft but merciless. If they know you're alive, you'll be dead before sunrise. We can protect you if you cooperate. Olivia lifted her head. What do you mean, we'll give you a new identity, a new life? Hannah Carter dies tonight. The words drained the room of sound. Dies. No funeral. No family. No trace. Just another name. Another face. A fragile existence between what's real and what's erased. She signed the papers in a daze, as if her hands no longer belonged to her. Hours later, the Boston Evening News reported nurse Olivia Bennet dies in a car accident on I-90. No relatives. Body burned beyond recognition. But Olivia, now Hannah Carter, was still alive, hidden in a small cabin deep in the forests of Montana, where snow buried every path out. She thought that was the end. But 3 months later, in the stillness of long winter nights when loneliness gnawed at her sanity, she realized someone out there was looking for Hannah Carter. A message appeared on an anonymous forum she accidentally stumbled upon. $10 million for information on the person responsible for Hannah Carter's death. Posted by Eric Dalton. The name made her chest tighten, though she'd never heard it before. Who was he? Why would he care about a simple nurse the world believed was dead? Olivia clicked on the poster's hidden profile. No photo, no address. Only a small emblem, a white rose on a black background with words carved in thin blade-like script. Some graves hold the living. A shiver ran down her spine. For the first time in months, her fear wasn't of being hunted, but of what was coming for her. And strangely, her heart trembled with something else, something that felt dangerously like anticipation. That night in her wooden cabin under falling snow, Olivia turned on the desk lamp and looked at an old photo of her and her sister in Boston. She whispered half to herself, "If someone left flowers on your grave every week, would you dare come back just to see them?" Outside, the moonlight traced the crack in the wall like a sign of something drawing near. Something both terrifying and impossible to resist. If you felt drawn into this story, follow the channel to continue with Olivia in part 2, where the past begins to return and love appears in the most unexpected place. Mornings in Montana always carried a deceptive peace. Fog blanketed the rooftops, slid down the pine branches, and slowly dissolved under the first touch of sunlight. Olivia Bennett sat on the wooden porch holding a cup of cold tea, her gaze lost in the endless white stretching before her. A month had passed since she read the mysterious message about a man named Eric Dalton, the one who had offered $10 million to avenge her death. Since that day, sleep had become a stranger. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him a faceless man standing silently before a gravestone bearing her name, laying down a bouquet of white roses. A haunting image both beautiful and terrifying. She didn't know why he did it, or even if he truly existed. But the thought that someone out there believed she was worth remembering, worth mourning, unsettled her heart. For the first time in months, Olivia felt she wasn't completely invisible. That afternoon, a small delivery truck stopped at her gate. The driver handed her the usual supplies: canned food, a few books, and the local newspaper. As Olivia signed the receipt, her eyes caught a small, folded note taped to the corner of the box. She opened it, one handwritten line. "The grave in Boston has fresh flowers every Wednesday." No signature, no trace, only a faint scent of tobacco and mint. Olivia's heartbeat stuttered. Her hand trembled as she held the note, proof of something her rational mind refused to believe. Someone knew she was alive. Someone wanted her to come back. Night fell faster than usual. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines like distant voices. Olivia lay awake, the message echoing in her mind. When she closed her eyes, she saw it again. The cold gravestone, the white roses, and a dark figure standing still in the morning fog. Her memory drifted back to 2 years ago, the night of that fateful shift at Boston Mercy. A patient had been rushed in with 3 gunshot wounds to the shoulder and abdomen. Blood soaked the stretcher. The man had grabbed her hand as consciousness slipped away. His voice hoarse but commanding. "Don't let me die." She had kept her promise, fighting with the doctors to bring him back. When he woke up, she was already on another shift. She never saw him again. His name she couldn't recall, but his eyes dark as ashes she had never forgotten. She jumped up, rummaging through the old FBI files she had once been allowed to read about that Boston shooting. The first name on the list of survivors stared back at her: Eric Dalton. A heartbeat thundered through her chest, sharp and deep. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. It couldn't be coincidence. 2 weeks later, Olivia left Montana. Her hair was short now, her passport fake. She told no one, there was no one left to tell. The worn bus rumbled through snow-capped mountains, carrying her away from the sweet prison she had called safety, a ghost leaving her own grave. On the way, she used a payphone to search the address of Oak Hill Cemetery, just outside Boston. Her pulse synced with the groaning engine, each passing mile stretching like eternity. Wednesday morning. Boston was draped in mist. She took a taxi from the central station wearing a wool hat and dark glasses. The cemetery was nearly empty, only a few workers raking leaves and a priest murmuring prayers in the distance. As she stepped through the iron gate, time seemed to rewind. Cold headstones, birds darting through fog. Each step tightened her chest until she saw it, her own name carved in stone: Hannah Carter, beloved daughter and sister. White roses rested neatly on the grave, fresh and dewy, as if placed there less than an hour ago. Their fragrance was sweet and cold as steel. She knelt down, brushing a fingertip over the petals, still wet with morning frost. not an illusion. Someone had been here, recently. A soft sound broke the silence. A car door closing, followed by footsteps crunching slowly across the gravel. Olivia froze. Her heartbeat pounded so loudly it drowned out the wind. Then a voice low, rough with a faint Italian undertone, cut through the fog. 6 months. And I still haven't forgotten. She turned. The man approached. Tall, commanding, dressed in a long black coat, gloved hands holding another bouquet. His hair was jet black streaked with silver, his face sharp, and his eyes, those eyes stopped her breath. Dark as the night she'd barely survived. Deep as an abyss. He knelt before the grave, removed his gloves, placed the fresh bouquet beside the others, and brushed away a few stray blades of grass covering her name. His voice came soft, almost carried away by the wind. If there's a place between life and death, I hope you've found peace there. Olivia bit her lip, a tear slipping free. She stepped out from behind the cypress shadows and whispered hoarsely, "Some graves don't have the dead beneath them." He stiffened, tilting his head as if unsure whether he'd heard right. Then slowly turned. Through the mist, their eyes met. Shock, anger, then pain flickering across his face. The world held its breath. A crow cried harshly overhead, shattering the frozen silence. "It can't be!" His voice cracked. "Olivia." She nodded. He stepped toward her, not rushing, but with the gravity of a man walking through years. When only a breath separated them, he stopped. His hand trembled in the air, afraid to touch her. "I buried you myself," he said quietly. "They told me it was you. I believed them." She looked into the eyes of the man what's known as the Devil of Boston and saw something fragile, lost, almost human. "I never died, Eric. They made me disappear because I saw what I wasn't supposed to see." He was silent for a long time, then suddenly pulled her into his arms. His grip was firm, desperate, his breath ragged against her neck. "I thought nothing could hurt me anymore. Until you left this world." The warmth of him seeped through her skin, strange yet achingly familiar. She wanted to push him away but couldn't. Because in that embrace there were no gunshots, no storms, no trembling heartbeats, only a fragile peace like light piercing through fog. A car horn blared in the distance. Eric let her go, his eyes hardening sharp once more. "Who knows you're alive?" "No one." "Good, we have to leave." "Now." She echoed softly. He bent down, picked up a fallen rose, and placed one petal in her hand. "When you return from the dead, you're never alone again. The one who laid flowers on your grave chose to survive with you." Before she could respond, Eric took her hand, his stride decisive and fierce. A black SUV idled nearby. As they approached, 2 bodyguards opened the doors, eyes scanning the fog. Olivia hesitated, glancing once more at her gravestone. The mist swallowed the engraved words, leaving only a blank, pale stone erasing her past. She drew a deep breath and stepped into the car. The SUV sped away in silence. Through the window, Boston receded into shadow. Eric said nothing, his jaw-tight gaze fixed ahead. Only when they crossed the Charlestown Bridge did he speak, his voice, low, rough, like it had been forged in smoke and war. You shouldn't have come back, Olivia. This city is a battlefield. Now that Bratva knows you're alive, they won't stop." She turned to look at him. The dim light reflected off his face, the same face she'd once seen pale and bleeding under the hospital lights. "Then why bring flowers to the grave of a woman you only met for a few hours?" He glanced at her eyes so deep she felt herself fall in. "Because in those few hours, you saved me. And some debts. Olivia, can't be repaid in blood." The car climbed the hill toward a secluded estate by the bay, golden lights shimmering across the water like wounds slowly healing. When they stopped, Eric turned to her, voice low, a warning, almost a vow. "From this moment on, your old life is truly over." The door opened, letting in the salt wind, the scent of the sea, and something else freedom costly as life itself. Olivia stepped out, staring at the mansion rising from the fog lights glowing faintly behind thick glass. She knew once she crossed that threshold, there would be no way back. But when Eric Dalton's gaze lingered on her warm, pained unyielding, she understood something simple and devastating. Sometimes all it takes is one reason strong enough to walk willingly into the dark. And for her, that reason was him. Eric Dalton's mansion stood perched atop a cliff overlooking North Shore Bay, where the waves crashed against the rocks like wild, unrestrained heartbeats. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress dressed in luxury bulletproof walls, double-layered glass corridors winding like a maze. Everything here exuded a cold kind of power, beautiful, dangerous, just like its owner. When the SUV stopped in the stone-paved courtyard, Olivia felt as though she had stepped into another world. The air outside was sharp and salty, but inside, it was warm, thick with the scent of sandalwood and dark coffee. A man in a black suit bowed as they entered. "Welcome home, Mr. Dalton." The word home sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She didn't belong here. Not in the world of men who could buy and sell lives with a nod. But when Eric's hand brushed lightly against her back, just a signal of safety, she realized she didn't want to leave. She was shown to a large room on the second floor. The window opened toward the sea, where the sky and ocean blended into a single sheet of silvery gray. On the table stood a glass vase holding a few white roses, just like the ones on her grave. "He puts them everywhere," she murmured, almost to herself. Eric paused. "They remind me that the most beautiful things are often the most fragile." His voice was low, rough, with a timbre that made her heartbeat falter. She turned away, afraid to meet his gaze. If she did, she feared she might forget that this man had once ordered dozens of deaths. Dinner was served in a marble-lined dining hall. Candlelight flickered on the walls, painting distorted reflections like broken memories. Olivia sat silently, stirring her soup without touching her wine. "Still afraid of me?" The question made her look up and meet his dark, steady eyes. "You're Eric Dalton," she said quietly. "That name makes all of Boston step aside." "And you," he replied slowly, "are the only one who dared walk out of your own grave to find me." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was taut, stretched between two worlds. His darkness, her fragile light. That first night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the waves pounding against the rocks. Each crash a shattered memory. Moonlight spilled across the ceiling in ribbons of silver. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate stopping, right outside her door. "You didn't lock it." His voice was soft, not a question, just an observation. Still used to guarding people, only the ones who've already died once. She turned, seeing him in the moonlight, shirt unbuttoned at the collar shoulders, broad hair tousled by sea wind. He didn't move closer, but something in his gaze stole the air from her lungs. It was both protection and possession. "Do you think they'll find me?" "Not if." But when he said quietly, "Bratva never loses a target." "And the FBI?" A faint smile crossed his lips. "They care about justice. I care about keeping you alive." That was when she realized he hadn't said protect you. He'd said keep you alive, as if her life no longer belonged to her. In the days that followed, she grew accustomed to the rhythm of this strange sanctuary. The staff were few, their movements silent and precise. Outside, the only sounds were the sea and the cries of gulls. Every morning, Eric worked in the top-floor office, his desk covered in files, maps, and shipping routes. And she wandered the house like a refugee lost in paradise. One afternoon, she passed by the basement firing range. The door was ajar, and the air smelled of gunpowder and steel. Eric was there, sleeves rolled up, pistol in hand, concentration so sharp she dared not breathe. Each shot struck dead center, cold, precise, ruthless, and strangely beautiful. When the last bullet echoed, he turned. His gaze found her instantly, as if he'd known she'd been there all along. "Want to try?" She shook her head. "I hate guns. Yet you survived among men who only believe in violence." He set the gun down and stepped toward her. Maybe she said softly, as I didn't know how strong I was, until being the last one standing was the only choice left. He smiled then. Not the cold smirk she'd seen before, but something softer, almost admiring. "You're not like anyone I've ever met, Olivia." "Because I came back from the dead." "No," he said. "Because for the first time, you make my death feel like something to fear." The words froze her. In that brief moment, something shifted between them, light as breath, deep as the sea. Neither spoke again. But his eyes said what words could not. If this world was a battlefield, she was his only weakness. On Saturday night, it rained. She went down to the kitchen for water when she heard piano music. The melody floated from the living room, clair de lune, slow and dreamlike, as if someone was playing to keep a memory alive. Eric sat at the piano, his fingers gliding over the keys, speaking silently to his past. When he stopped, she stepped out of the shadows. "I didn't think a man like you played Debussy." He looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. "I had a mother who taught music before the world took her away." She didn't speak. Not because of the story, but because of how he said it calmly, yet with an old ache too deep to cry out. "How old were you when she died? 7. And then you learned to shoot instead of play." "No. I learned to survive." Lightning flashed outside, lighting his face for an instant. Beautiful, almost cruel. Olivia stepped closer, her hand brushing the piano keys, touching the fading notes. "Do you ever want to leave it all behind?" "Yes," he said, eyes locked on hers. "But only if someone comes with me." In that instant, the rain, the world, the distance all disappeared. She saw not a mafia king, but a man who had once been saved, once lost all hope, and was learning to believe in something beyond blood. He lifted a hand, touching her cheek lightly, almost asking, "May I?" She didn't answer. And in that silence, he leaned forward, pressing his lips gently to her forehead, a kiss not of possession, but of something inevitable just beginning. That night, she lay awake again, listening to the waves below the cliff. In the devil's house, she felt safer than anywhere else. And Olivia knew this peace was as fragile as breath, because out there, men with guns and blood oaths were still hunting. And she, the woman who had once died, would soon have to choose between love and her life. The next morning, the sea was still as liquid silver. Fog blurred the glass windows, leaving only Olivia's reflection fragile adrift. She stood in the lavish bedroom and still felt imprisoned. Far below, Eric Dalton trained with his guards. He moved with the precision of someone who had lived too long under threat. No wasted motion, no hesitation. She realized this was a man who lived each second as if the world were trying to steal his breath. When he turned and caught her gaze from the balcony, his lips curved slightly, not a smile, but an acknowledgement he knew she was watching. The morning passed quietly. Olivia sat in the library, surrounded by the faint scent of old paper and tobacco. The room carried the weight of Eric's past black and white photographs of the Boston docks yellowed clippings, and one framed picture on the desk. A boy of 8 playing piano beside a brown-haired woman. Their eyes were identical, a joy so pure it hurt to look at. "He doesn't like anyone coming in here." His voice behind her was low, rough enough to make her jump. Eric stepped inside, removing his jacket, sweat still dampening his hair. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I was just curious." "It's fine." He exhaled, picked up the frame. "My mother. She loved white roses. Every winter I keep them in the house. Maybe to fool myself she's still here." She looked at him and saw the crack in his iron shell, a man who had lost too much to fear losing anything more. "Don't you have anyone else?" He shook his head. "My family died in a car explosion when I was 12. I survived because I hid in the cargo box." His voice didn't shake, but his fingers whitened around the frame. "They called it an accident. But I knew it was Bratva. They killed them to punish my father for refusing to cooperate." In that moment, she understood why his eyes always carried the shadow of rage, a hatred so old it had turned to blood. By afternoon, the rain had begun. The sky over Boston turned the color of ash, and the drops lashed against the windows like 1,000 tiny blades. Eric stood by the glass making a few quiet phone calls. His tone shifted half English, half Italian, sharp and clipped. Olivia couldn't hear every word, but one name kept surfacing: Volkov. When he hung up, she asked softly, "Bratva again?" "Yes, they're moving cargo at South Boston Port tomorrow night." "I have men there." "Your men? You mean killers?" He turned, and the look in his eyes made her shiver. "Not everyone kills for money, Olivia. Some only kill to stay alive." She didn't answer, but something inside her collapsed. Between them now stood more than gratitude and rescue, 2 souls poised on opposite ends of a blade. One on the side of justice, the other on sin. One wrong step, and everything would turn to ash. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. The wind carried the scent of the sea mixed with diesel from distant ships. She stepped into the hall, heading toward the kitchen, and saw Eric sitting alone in the living room. Firelight flickered over his face, warm and cold at once. On the table sat an untouched glass of whiskey and his familiar silver gun. "I thought you were asleep," she said. "I don't sleep much." She hesitated, then sat across from him. The fire reflected in his eyes, weary beyond loneliness. "You'll go to the docks tomorrow?" "Yes, I can't let them keep killing my men." "You always go yourself." He shrugged. "Loyalty lasts only until fear or money run out." "I trust neither." "And me." He looked at her for a long time. "You're not like them. You don't need loyalty or fear. You only need truth." The word caught in her throat. She didn't know whether to feel comforted or terrified that a man like him spoke of truth, because in Eric's world, truth and death were the same thing. What happened next came like a skipped heartbeat. He rose, crossed the space between them, leaning down. The scent of whiskey and wood smoke wrapped around her. "Do you believe in fate, Olivia?" "No, I believe in choice." "Then what would you choose, knowing I can't lead you out of the dark?" She met his eyes, and in them she saw not power, but fear. Fear she might walk away. "I don't choose the light, Eric. I choose the one who makes me want to stay." For the first time, he didn't hide behind control. His hand cupped her cheek fingers, tracing its curve as if afraid she might vanish. The kiss came softly, then deepened, not born of desire, but of two souls clinging to each other in a storm. When he drew back, their foreheads stayed pressed together, breath mingling. "You don't know what you're walking into," he whispered. "I do," she said. "And I'm still walking." At dawn, he left. The black car disappeared down the coastal road, smoke curling into the fog. She stood on the balcony, fingers gripping the frozen railing. His voice from the night before echoed in her mind. "If I don't come back, don't look for me." But all that day, Olivia couldn't stay still. She paced the halls, listening to guards patrol in silence to the radio, warning of a storm along the coast. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from instinct, the kind of instinct that belongs to those who've stood too close to death. When night fell, she opened her laptop, accessing the FBI Witness Protection Network. The connection was weak, but enough to load one brief line: mass shooting at South Boston Port. Dead 2 missing. Suspects brought Vassell. The blood drained from her face. She didn't need to read more. She knew who was missing. That night, she left the mansion. No one noticed, perhaps, because he had taught her how to move without making a sound. Wind slashed her face as she drove the old Jeep toward the city. Rain poured down like molten silver. Each sweep of the wipers brought back flashes of Eric, his eyes, his hands, his unfinished promise. When she reached the docks, the area was sealed off by police tape. Red lights swept over oil-slicked water where the hulls of ships lay silent as corpses. A police officer said, "No survivors." They hid the shipment in a container and detonated it. The whole pier burned. Olivia stood frozen numb. She heard nothing but rain. Her hands clenched until blood welled between her fingers. Then, from the wreckage, she saw them pull a dark figure from the debris, soaked, blood-streaked, barely breathing. Eric Dalton. They carried him to the ambulance. She ran after them, ignoring shouts to stop. As they closed the doors, his eyes fluttered open and found hers. A faint smile touched his lips, red with blood. "I told you not to come." She gripped his hand, tears mingling with the rain. "And you once said no one could kill you." "Maybe. I forgot that you could." It was half a joke, half truth. Because in that moment, Olivia knew if he died, whatever remained of her would die too. Outside, sirens wailed. Red light pulsed over his pale face. In her palm, his blood was still warm. As the ambulance sped into the storm, Olivia understood fate hadn't just brought her to Eric Dalton. It had bound her to him, to a debt written not in law, but in life itself. A debt between two souls, one who had been saved, and one who had forgotten why he lived, until he found the other again. The room was cold white and sterile. The steady beeping of the heart monitor blended with the soft patter of rain outside the window. Olivia sat there, still in the soaked clothes from the night before, her eyes red. her hands never leaving his motionless one. Eric Dalton, the man who once made all of Boston bow, lay still, his face, pale lips, dry wounds wrapped tight across his shoulder and chest. She looked at him and realized something paradoxical. For the first time, he looked human. Not the cold, untouchable king of shadows, but a man, fragile, alone, and in need of saving. The doctor entered, speaking quietly. "He's lucky. The bullet grazed the ribcage, didn't touch the heart. But he's lost a lot of blood. He'll need complete rest for at least 2 weeks." Olivia nodded, her eyes never leaving him. When the door closed, she gripped his hand tighter and whispered, "You once said you didn't trust anyone, Eric. Then let me do the trusting for you this time." She didn't know how long she stayed like that. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him again in smoke and blood, that stubborn smile defying death itself. And then, as dawn's first light slipped through the curtains, the hand she held moved. "Olivia." His voice was rough, weak, but enough to make her heart twist. She looked up, tears spilling immediately. "You're awake. Don't you remember anything I remember? Everything." He tried to smile, but it hurt. She helped him sit up, adjusting the pillows. "Don't move. The doctor said you need rest." "I've rested enough for a lifetime," he murmured. "I just need to know you're not hurt." The simplicity of it broke her. His hand searched for hers, squeezed gently, then loosened as if afraid it was all a dream. "You didn't listen," he said quietly. "I told you not to come." "And if I hadn't, you wouldn't be here," she replied softly. "Stop giving me orders, Eric. I'm not running anymore. I stayed because I chose to." He looked at her so long she had to look away. In that stark white hospital room, only 2 people remained, and the truth between them needed no words. They had both crossed the line of fear. In the days that followed, Olivia cared for him as if it were what she was born to do. She changed his bandages, mixed his medicine, made small acts of tenderness in a world that had given her none. Eric, even in recovery, remained vigilant. No guards inside, no nurses. He didn't know, no deep sleep. When you've died once, he told her, you learn never to close your eyes completely again. One night, she found him standing by the window, staring at the wind scattering dry leaves across the parking lot. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "The night at the docks," he said. "The man who shot me wasn't Bratva. He was mine." She froze. "You mean betrayal?" He nodded. "Someone sold my position to both sides. And he's still out there." "You know who—" "Not yet," he said. "But I have a way to make him show himself." He gave a faint smile. "You won't like it." She didn't answer, but the fear returned, not of losing him to bullets, but to vengeance. She knew he was preparing for another war, and this time there was no guarantee he'd come back. That night, Olivia woke to the sound of wind howling through the hallway. The bed beside her was empty. Heart pounding, she ran out the door ajar, curtains stirring in the draft. At the end of the corridor, the dim light revealed him leaning against the wall. White shirt unbuttoned, shoulders still bandaged, a cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. "Can't you stay still for once?" she scolded softly, rushing to haze him. He smiled, exhaling smoke. "That room feels like a coffin. Out here, at least there's air." "You're still injured? I've been hurt more times than you've breathed," he said lightly, then looked at her. "But it's never hurt as much as watching you cry." She fell silent. Rain traced shining paths down the window pane. And amid that soft sound, his words hung in the air like a song without notes. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because they make people believe." He crushed the cigarette, stepped closer, and touched her cheek. "Then believe me, Olivia, just once." In that instant, right and wrong blurred away. When he drew her close, his warmth seeped through her skin, melting the layers of fear she'd carried. The kiss came slow, not desperate, not fierce, but deep, like rain sinking into dry earth. She heard his heartbeat steady and real, blending with her own, the rhythm of 2 fugitives finding shelter in each other, if only for a moment the world forgot them. By dawn, he was asleep. For the first time, he looked at peace, no twitching, no shadows chasing him through dreams. She sat beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, and whispered, "I don't know what's coming next. But at least tonight you're safe." Outside, the morning crept over the rain-soaked city, painting it gold. A thin beam of light fell across the scars on his wrist, faint, fragile reminders of a life already fractured. She bent down, kissed them softly, as if she could erase the pain they told. And in that pale glow, she understood love didn't always come from promises, but from the choice to stay beside someone utterly broken. That afternoon, a stranger arrived at the hospital. Tall, lean, dark suit, cool brown eyes. He introduced himself as Jonas Reed, attorney for Dalton Industries. Olivia sensed something off the moment she saw the look that passed between the two men, something too calm to be trust. "We need to talk privately," Jonas said. Eric nodded. 10 minutes. They went into a side room. Through the frosted glass, Olivia saw only shadows, tense, sharp movements. When Jonas left, he wore a faint smile, but his eyes were cold as steel. Eric leaned against the wall. Afterward, silent, his face unreadable. "What happened?" she asked. He opened his eyes and gave a thin, almost cruel smile. "The one who sold me out wasn't an enemy. He's someone I once saved." "What will you do?" His gaze turned dark, bottomless. "Give him exactly what he chose." Olivia stepped back. She knew then, from this moment on, they were no longer running. They were heading straight into the storm. And perhaps their love was only now about to face its real test. That night, Eric left the hospital. No one knew where he went. Olivia could only watch as his car disappeared into the rain, her heart tightening with each heartbeat. The city wind howled through the buildings, carrying a warning the real storm hadn't yet begun. And she, the woman who had died once and lived again, could only pray that when he returned, the world would still be whole enough for them to call what they had, by one fragile word, peace. The night in Boston was thick as tar. The rain had stopped, but puddles lingered on the curbs, catching the shimmer of amber streetlights. From the top floor of the Haven Hotel, Olivia looked down at the glistening streets below, where hurried figures slipped into the night like nameless shadows. Eric still hadn't returned. 4 days had passed. No calls, no messages, only a keycard and a short note left on the table. "If I don't come back, head north. Trust no one, especially those who say I sent them." Every word felt like a blade. She'd read them so many times she knew them by heart. Yet each time the weight grew heavier, because she knew those words weren't instructions, they were a farewell. The door burst open. A man's low, gravelly voice echoed Miss Bennet. "Mr. Dalton sent us." Olivia froze, stepping back on instinct. 3 men in black suits, earpieces glinting faintly. Their English was fluent, but the cadence carried an Eastern European shadow. One of them stepped forward, flashing an ID card bearing the Dalton Industries logo, a thin smile on his lips. "Mr. Dalton needs you. We should leave immediately." She studied the card carefully. It looked authentic almost. But then she saw it, the printed crest, slightly off-center. A detail Eric once told her only the fakes ever get wrong. Her lips pressed together. She took another step back. "You said Eric needs me." "Yes, then tell me the passcode." The man hesitated, then forced a chuckle. "That won't be necessary, Miss Bennet. We only follow orders." That was all she needed. Without another word, Olivia grabbed the glass vase beside her and hurled it toward the light fixture. The crash rang sharp. She bolted toward the side door, heart hammering. Footsteps thundered behind her, then the muffled hiss of a silencer. A bullet tore through the wall, grazing past her head by inches. She sprinted down the corridor, shoes slipping on the wet marble, and slammed straight into a man stepping out of the elevator. Long coat, dark eyes, a voice she knew too well. "Cold as steel, I told you not to trust anyone. Eric." Everything snapped into place in an instant. He raised his gun 3 shots. 2 men fell. The third lunged with a knife. Eric spun, caught him, slammed him against the wall. A crack, bones breaking. Blood spattered across the pale tile like a stroke of red paint. Olivia stood frozen, breath caught in her chest. He dropped the weapon, grabbed her hand. "Let's go. You're hurt, no. But if you stay, you will be." They raced through the parking garage, the chill rising from the concrete floor. Eric opened the door of a black Bentley, pushed her inside, and gunned the engine. Behind them, sirens wailed the city, screaming awake. When they'd cleared the city limits, he finally slowed. Olivia's still trembled fingers gripping the seatbelt. "Where have you been?" she whispered. "Meeting a traitor. Jonas Reed." He shot her a quick look, surprised. "How do you know that name?" "I saw him at the hospital." "His eyes, he wasn't there for you." Eric nodded, eyes fixed on the road. "He works for Bratva." "Worse, he knows you're alive." She turned away, her chest tightening. "Then, they'll know who I am." "They will," he said quietly. "Jonas sent your photo to Volkov, head of their Eastern Division. You're not just collateral anymore, Olivia." She swallowed. "I'm the target." He didn't deny it. They stopped at Marblehead Bay, the sea stretching silver under the moonlight. Waves lapped against the rocks, sounding like the city's tired sigh. Eric cut the engine, sitting in silence before speaking. "I never should have dragged you into this. It's too late for that. You can still leave. I can get you past the border. New name, new life, and you, I stay." She gave a bitter laugh. "You talk like we still have choices." "Olivia, I've lived my whole life in war. I know how to survive." "But you don't," she interrupted, turning to him. "Because if I leave, who's going to put flowers on your grave?" The silence that followed was heavy. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then he exhaled, shaking his head with a faint, helpless smile. "You always win, don't you?" "No, I just can't live in a world without you." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "Sometimes I forget you didn't just save my life at the hospital. You saved me from myself. And sometimes I forget," she whispered, "that I'm still here because I promised to keep you anchored to this world." The space between them vanished. He cupped her neck and kissed her deep salt and fierce tastings of every word they'd never said. Outside, the sea kept its rhythm, witness to 2 souls caught between love and sin. By the time they left the coast, dawn was breaking. Eric drove toward the abandoned warehouse on the city's edge, the old transit point he once shared with Jonas. "Stay in the car." "Don't move," he ordered. "What are you going to do?" "Finish it." Her stomach twisted. He stepped into the dark alone, like a man long acquainted with hell. Inside, the light was dim and yellow. Jonas waited, smiling faintly. "Dalton, I knew you'd come. You always like to talk before dying," Eric said coolly. Their exchange was brief, no shouting, no fight, only truth. Jonas confessed he'd sold Eric's location in exchange for his life and a few $1,000,000. "You don't get it," he said. "Volkov isn't just mafia. He's got the FBI in his pocket." Eric stayed silent, drew his gun, and aimed it at Jonas's chest. "You forget one thing, Jonas. I've never needed this world's justice." The shot was clean. 1 bullet, 1 fall. Jonas lay staring up at the gray ceiling, eyes wide open. Eric stood still for a moment, breathing out, then turned to leave. But headlights flared through the doorway of Olivia's car. She hadn't listened. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "I couldn't let you do this alone," she cried, tears streaming. Before he could reply, engines roared behind them, dozens of lights sharp and white. Bratva's convoy. Volkov had arrived. Chaos exploded. Gunfire ripped through the air smoke, filling the dock. Eric grabbed her, shoving her behind a wall. "Run! No, you're coming with me!" He fired back another round. Whizzing past, 1 bullet tore through his shoulder, blood splattering across her face. "Eric." "Go, Olivia. I'm not leaving without you." He caught her face in his bloodied hands, eyes blazing. "If I don't make it out, remember this. I lived my whole life just to find you." Then he turned, vanishing into the storm of smoke and bullets. She screamed his name, but the gunfire drowned it out. A guard pulled her back, dragging her away, her hand slipping from his for the 2nd time in her life. By the time the police arrived, the docks were burning. No body was found. Only a silver ring, engraved with a single letter O, lay on the cracked concrete, glinting in the puddled reflection of a gray sky. Olivia knelt, picked it up. In the faint light of dawn, she smiled a trembling, defiant smile. "If the sea can keep a secret, then let it keep you." She stood, turned away, and walked into the smoke and ash. Behind her, the waves whispered against the shore, a promise half kept. Some people never truly disappear, They're just waiting for the right moment to return. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Boston drowned in a damp chill that made every memory feel waterlogged. News of the warehouse explosion had spread as fast as the fire that night. The press called it a purge in the underworld. Police found only scraps of metal, a few unrecognizable bodies. No one named Eric Dalton was among the survivors. Olivia reread the report again and again as if repetition could somehow alter the words. But they stayed the same, still cold like a gravestone. She folded her phone shut and sat motionless on the wooden chair in a small motel near the Massachusetts border. The room was bare, one suitcase, a few documents, and a silver ring hanging from her neck. His ring. She wore it not to believe he was alive, but to believe that some part of her still was. A week later, a man came looking for her. Gray coat, dark glasses, a voice trained to hide emotion. "Miss Bennett, I'm Agent Keller, FBI." Olivia looked up, eyes tired. "You're late. We need your cooperation. It's about Dalton." Her heartbeat slowed. "He's dead." Keller shook his head slightly. "We're not certain. There's evidence Dalton was injured but pulled from the scene, and unregistered ambulance plates erased. And reports say the Bratva is hunting a woman under your name." Olivia rose, eyes flickering, half fear, half hope. "He's alive. We can't confirm that. But if he is, he's off the grid. And when Dalton lives, those who want him dead won't stop until they find you." He placed a thin envelope on the table. "We need you to come with us. Witness protection round 2. Olivia stared at the envelope, then back at him. "No." "Excuse me?" She spoke slowly, clearly, each word cutting through the air. "I already died once for them. If I have to die again, I'd rather know for whom." Something in Keller's expression changed. Maybe he hadn't expected this woman, a nurse, once defined by gentleness, to sound like someone who had already walked through fear and back. He retrieved the envelope and left without another word. When the door clicked shut, Olivia stood still, listening to the rain pound on the tin roof. And in that sound, a strange determination rose inside her. If Eric was alive, she would find him even if it meant walking through hell again. 2 days later, she boarded a night train bound for New York. No plan, only an old phone she'd once used to contact the FBI in secret, and a single photo of her and Eric by the Marblehead Bay. She sat by the window, watching city lights streak by. A tall man sat across from her, hat pulled low to cover half his face. She paid him little attention until he laid a folded newspaper on the table. The page opened perfectly to a headline, "Volkov assassinated in Manhattan. Suspect, Dalton, believed alive." Her blood froze. She looked up. The man remained still, his face half hidden in shadow. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer, just said quietly, "Sometimes to stay alive, you have to die more than once." She rose to leave, but his voice followed, "Don't look for Dalton. He's heading south. If you keep going, neither of you will have a way back." Her eyes widened. "You know where he is?" He smiled faintly, then stepped off at the next station, vanishing into the crowd as if he'd never existed. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She sat in silence, fingers brushing the ring at her neck. Heart torn between fear and longing. If he was alive, why hadn't he come for her? Or was staying away the only way to keep her safe? Was safety simply another word for life without him, Shin? When the train reached New York, she didn't stop. She bought another ticket to Miami. South, not because she believed the stranger, but because her instinct, the one that had never failed when it came to him, pulled her there. 3 days later, she arrived in Miami. The city was nothing like Boston. Bright sun, salt-heavy wind, and a sea so blue it almost hurt to look at. But beneath all that color, she felt the same undercurrent of danger. People whispered that Dalton once ran a private port here, a place where no one came or left without his permission. She rented a small apartment near the docks and waited. Each night she stood on the balcony, watching the lights flicker across the water. And on the 3rd night, she saw it, a black yacht, sleek and silent, sliding toward the shore. Its name painted in silver letters, Luna. A figure stepped onto the dock. Tall, broad-shouldered, his gait so familiar, her heart nearly stopped. "Eric," she breathed. She ran barefoot across the sand, her breath trembling. The man was speaking to someone, the yacht's lights catching half his face, the thin scar on his cheek. The eyes she could never forget. He was alive. He was really alive. But when she called softly, "Eric," he turned, and in that moment she realized those were not the same eyes. The warmth was gone, replaced by something colder than the sea. He stared stunned and said hoarsely, "You shouldn't be here." She stopped only a few meters away. "You're alive. Why did you hide it from me? Because they needed to believe I was dead." "And me? Was I supposed to die too?" He didn't answer. The ocean wind tangled her hair, and in that silence, she understood he had done something he could never undo. She took another step, tears glinting under the moon. "You killed Volkov, yes. And who's next? The ones who made you bait." She saw it in his eyes. He was being hunted, but he was also the hunter now. And between them, love had become fire-consuming, not saving. He reached out, brushed a tear from her cheek, his voice trembling. "I tried to give you peace, but now that you're here, I have no reason left to hide." And in that moment, Olivia understood between sea and night, there was only one path left for them to live together, or to die together. She whispered back almost tenderly, "If this is hell, then at least we don't have to walk through it alone." The waves rose, the wind howled through the masts. The Luna pulled away from the shore, its lights fading into the horizon, carrying with it two souls who had long crossed the line between salvation and ruin. Behind them, the city of Miami burned in gold, as if bidding farewell to two people who no longer belonged to its world. The night sea was thick as velvet moonlight, scattering silver trails across the water. The Luna cut through the waves, gliding farther from shore, leaving behind the glowing edge of Miami, fading into darkness. Olivia stood on the deck, the wind tangling her hair as she stared into the endless horizon. She didn't ask where they were going, because she already knew some answers hurt more than the truth itself. Eric stood behind her hand, resting on the railing, his gaze as deep and quiet as the sea. For the first time she saw real exhaustion in him, not on his face, but in his eyes. The look of a man who had walked too far down a road that no longer had a way back. "Can't sleep." His voice was low, roughened by the wind and salt. She turned, shaking her head. "No, I was just thinking, every time you leave, the sea swallows a little more of you." He smiled faintly, but it never reached his eyes. "The sea doesn't swallow anyone, Olivia. It only keeps what people can't let go of." "And what about you? What have you let go of?" "Everything," he said softly. "Except you." For a heartbeat, she didn't know whether to ache or believe him. The man standing before her, the one who once made the Russian mafia tremble, spoke like someone who had already lost everything. They sailed through the night. By morning, Luna anchored in open water, far from any coast. Eric opened a steel case below deck. Inside were faded files maps and a handful of old film photographs. This was Volkov's last known network, he said. But after his death, someone took his place. A new name, Mikhail Orlov. She took the photo he handed her, a young man with cold eyes and a knife-edged smile. "What does he have to do with you?" "He was my student," Eric replied, lighting a cigarette. "I taught him everything. And he used it to kill me." Olivia watched the smoke twist into the pale morning light. "So what are you going to do now?" His answer was simple. "End it." She was silent for a long time, then whispered, "Have you ever thought about stopping never?" "Why not?" "Because if I stop everything I've lost becomes meaningless." The words struck her hard. He lived for purpose, but had forgotten how to live for himself. She stepped closer, gently touching his hand. "Then let me remind you why you ever wanted to live." He said nothing, just looked at her for a long time. Then his fingers closed around hers, a silent surrender. 3 days later, they reached a small island off the coast of Cuba. It was a place Eric had kept hidden for years, a sanctuary and a secret. They stayed in an abandoned villa overlooking the sea. Its walls were covered in moss, its windows thick with dust. Yet at night, under candlelight and shared breath, it felt almost like peace. Sometimes Olivia woke to find him sitting alone in the dark, the tip of his cigarette glowing red. "Are you afraid to sleep?" she asked. "No," he murmured, eyes lost in the horizon. I'm afraid when I close my eyes, I'll dream it all again. The people you killed. He turned to her. The ones I didn't save. She sat beside him, laying her hand over his chest, where his heart still beat slow and heavy. You can't save everyone, Eric. I only ever wanted to save one, he said softly. And every time I was too late. Her throat tightened. Not this time, she whispered. The next morning, the sky was clear, unnaturally calm. Eric stood on the porch, speaking into a satellite phone, his tone clipped and cold like a man giving orders to fate. When he turned back, his face was grim. Mikhail's found me. We have to move before sunset. He hesitated, conflict flickering in his eyes. Olivia, you can't come this time. You're leaving me again. I'm protecting you. No, you're running from the truth that you're afraid to lose me. Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced him. She stepped forward until they stood face to face. You've spent your whole life running from what makes you human. But love doesn't make you weak, Eric. It's what keeps you human. The words broke something inside him. He dropped his head, a hollow laugh catching in his throat. Do you know why I can't let you stay? Because you're afraid I'll die? No, his eyes burned. Because if you die, I'll kill the world. Her breath caught. Between them, reason vanished, leaving only something fierce, tender, and terrifying. She reached out, pulling him into her arms, her fingers clutching his shoulders, feeling his heartbeat pounding like war drums. Then, don't let me go. If death comes, let it find us together. He held her tight so hard it almost hurt, whispering against her ear. Neither of us dies. Not this time. That night they set sail. On deck, Olivia wore his leather jacket, her hand gripping the pistol he'd made her carry just in case. The sea was eerily still, but the air carried the taste of storm. In the distance, faint lights appeared, 3 ships, no flags. Eric raised the binoculars, his eyes narrowing. Mikhail, you're sure I taught him how to hunt? Now he's using it on me. She swallowed hard. What's the plan? He gave her a thin smile. To make him think I'm running. He spun the wheel sharply. Luna veered off course, surging toward the reefs. Gunfire cracked through the night bullets, slicing into the waves. Eric, she screamed. He didn't answer. Below deck. Now. But she didn't listen. She ran to him just as a bullet grazed his side, blood spraying across the deck. Eric? He gritted his teeth, voice strangled. I'm fine. We're almost there. Ahead, a faint glow appeared, a lonely island, small and forgotten, nearly erased from maps. The Island of Oblivion, he had once called it. They hit shore exhausted. Eric collapsed onto the sand, blood seeping through his shirt, but his eyes still clear. Olivia dropped to her knees, pressing her trembling hands against the wound, her tears mixing with salt and rain. You can't sleep, do you hear me? He caught her wrist, whispering. If I don't wake tomorrow, you leave. Don't stay here. Don't say that, she cried. He gave a weak smile, voice fading. I've lived my life in darkness. Maybe you're the only reason I ever wanted to see the light. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering between sobs. Then you have to wake up. You haven't seen my sunrise yet. The sky began to pale. The sea turned gold. Eric lay still, his breath thin as a thread. Olivia held his hand, murmuring over and over like a prayer whispered by someone ready to trade her soul, just to see him open his eyes one more time. Sunlight cut through the morning haze like blades of gold, striking the ocean in sharp flashes. Olivia sat on the sand, her hands gripping his, refusing to let go, even as the warmth faded. She didn't know how long it had been. Only the crash of waves against rock, the fading pulse beneath her palm, and then silence. Everything went still. A seabird swooped low, crying softly as if to say goodbye. She lifted her face, the sunlight brushing across her tear-streaked cheeks. Eric, don't leave me. No answer. Only the breath of wind, the taste of salt, and the bitterness on her tongue. She pressed her ear to his chest again. Nothing. Her fists trembled as she pounded weakly against his heart. You promised, remember. You said you'd never leave me alone. And then, like a fragile miracle, a faint thud echoed under her palm. Once, then again. Eric, she gasped, her voice breaking. He grimaced, a slow breath escaping his lips like the whisper of the sea. His pale lips moved, voice rough and low. I still owe you one sunrise. Tears fell freely. For the first time in months, they didn't taste like despair, but like life being returned. She built a makeshift shelter from torn canvas and driftwood. The storm had passed, leaving the sea calm again. Eric lay resting, his wound wrapped in fabric torn from her shirt. Each time his eyes opened, she smiled. Each time they closed, she held her breath. 3 days passed. He recovered slowly, ate little, spoke less, but the fire in his gaze returned. Still deep as the ocean, only now stripped of its darkness. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, he asked Olivia, "If we make it out of this alive, have you ever thought about where you'd go?" She laughed softly, still winding the bandage around his chest. "Why ask that? We're on an island, even the maps forgot. I just want to know." "If there were no wars, no blood, what would you do?" She paused. "Maybe I'd open a small cafe. The kind that smells of waffles and plays soft jazz. And me." He looked toward the sea where the waves collided like tangled memories. "I never thought that far ahead. Before you, the future was only as long as a bullet." She took his hand gently. "Then let me teach you how to live past the bullet." Night fell, and the sky filled with stars. Olivia lay beside him, listening to the rhythm of the waves, mingling with his breath. In the dark, Eric's voice came softly. "Do you believe in fate?" "No," she said. "I believe in choices. Then you choose me, even knowing I can kill, lie, disappear at any moment." "I choose you," she whispered, "because only with you do I feel alive." He chuckled quietly, pulling her closer. "I thought I was a monster, Olivia. But you make me believe even monsters can be forgiven." "No one's born a monster, Eric. People only become one when they're too lonely." He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice rough. "Then don't let me be lonely anymore." His kiss was slow, tender, as if he feared waking the ocean. She closed her eyes, tasting salt and life returning with every breath. That night, they needed no promises, no future, only the fragile truth that they still had each other. At dawn, she woke to find him tracing lines in the sand. She walked over and saw what he'd drawn: maps, routes, directions marked by the wind. "What are you doing? Preparing for when we leave this place? You're sure you're strong enough?" He looked up, smiling faintly but with steady eyes. "I've survived worse places than this. I won't lose to an island or to a heart." She laughed, tears slipping down unnoticed. In that moment, she realized the man who once lived by violence was now learning to live by hope. And she was the reason for it. By late afternoon, they lit a fire. Eric showed her how to make smoke signals, how to read direction from the sun's shadow. "Were you ever a soldier?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I've run enough to know where to go when there's no one left to guide you." "And now you have me." He looked at her, nodding gently. "Yes, and that's why I'm more afraid of losing my way than ever." She touched the scar along his neck, her voice soft as the breeze. "I'm not your compass, Eric. I'm just the one willing to get lost with you." He didn't answer. The sunset burned crimson across his face, and for once he looked at peace, not because danger was gone, but because he finally knew where he was headed. Their last night on the island. The stars mirrored the firelight reflecting off the waves. Olivia leaned on his shoulder and whispered, "If we make it back tomorrow, what will you do?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'll disappear. Not to hide, but to start over. A new name, a clean life, one without blood or guns." "And me, I'll find you," she said firmly. "No matter where I am, even if the world no longer remembers you." He studied her for a long time, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a silver ring, the twin to the one she wore. He slid it onto her finger, his hand trembling. "I have no promises left, Olivia. But if one day you see calm seas and a clear sky, believe that somewhere I'm looking at the same horizon." She nodded, wrapping her arms around him. The wind carried the scent of salt, of survival, of an unspoken vow. At sunrise, Luna patched and Fragile set sail again. On deck, Olivia stood beside him, her hair whipping in the wind, sunlight spilling across the waves like a dream made real. He rested a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "When we leave here, we won't be Eric and Olivia anymore." "I know, but one thing won't change. What's that? I'll still recognize you no matter what name you wear." He smiled faintly, the smile of a man who had died once and been given permission to live again. The boat drifted farther from the island until it was nothing but a green speck on the vast blue sea. And for the first time, Olivia knew they weren't running from the past anymore. They were sailing toward the future. 1 year later, Lisbon stretched beneath the sunset like a sheet of golden silk terracotta rooftops, glowing church bells echoing through the hills. Olivia sat in the corner of a small cafe on a steep Alfama street, her hands still instinctively steady, as she brewed espresso just as she used to in Boston. On the counter, a chalkboard sign read, "Café da Lua," for those who found themselves again. She smiled. Customers came and went, most of them strangers. Yet sometimes among the passing faces, she caught a fleeting shadow of the past, a man in a black coat. Eyes deep and quiet like the sea. He had never returned, and she had never stopped believing that someday he would. That afternoon, light rain began to fall. Droplets streaked down the cafe window, glittering like fragments of old memories. Olivia was wiping the counter when the bell above the door chimed. A stranger entered, tall, lean, his face half hidden beneath a dark fedora. He took a seat by the window, where the rain turned the city into a watercolor blur, and said softly, "Black coffee. No sugar." Her breath caught. That voice, low rough, had once made her heart forget how to beat. No, she told herself. The world was full of similar voices. Even so, her hands trembled as she poured the coffee. The rich aroma rose, bringing back the memory of a distant island, of his whisper against her ear. "If one day you smell coffee mixed with the sea wind, it means I'm near." She brought the cup to his table. The man looked up. Those eyes deep, steady, a hidden light beneath dark lashes like a flame that refused to die. "Do you still like white roses?" he asked quietly. Olivia froze. The cup nearly slipped from her hand, but he caught it before it fell. That same hand, strong, warm, with the old scar across his wrist. "Eric," she whispered, her lips trembling. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that blurred the line between dream and reality. "I promised, didn't I? No one can make me disappear as long as you still remember me." She stepped forward and threw her arms around him. Outside, rain drummed softly, dissolving months of waiting into the air like salt in water. She felt his heartbeat through his coat, slow, steady, familiar, like an old song returning at last. They sat by the window watching the rain. He told her that after leaving the island, he'd changed his name and worked underground across Europe, helping Interpol dismantle what remained of Mikhail Orlov's network. "I didn't want to go back to that life," he said, "but sometimes to erase the darkness, you have to step into it one last time." Her eyes glistened. "You shouldn't have had to." "I did," he replied quietly. "Because if I didn't, I'd never stop thinking there was still a corner of the world where you weren't safe." She laughed softly through tears. "The world was never safe, Eric. But when you're here, I don't need it to be." He was silent for a while, then reached into his coat and pulled out a silver ring, the one she'd lost, swept away by the storm. "I found it on the southern shore," he said. "I think the sea decided to send it back." He placed the ring in her palm. "This time, I won't let it fall." Her voice trembled. "Are you proposing to me?" He tilted his head, a faint smile softening his face. "No. I just want you to know, no matter how many names, lives, or worlds I change, these hands were always meant to hold yours." That night, the city glowed after the rain. On the cafe rooftop, they sat side by side watching ships drift out to sea. "Will you leave again?" she asked. "No," he said, eyes on the horizon. "I've been everywhere only to realize home isn't on any map. It's in the eyes of the one who's waiting." Olivia rested her head on his shoulder. "Then you're home now." Silence settled, only the rhythm of their hearts and the last drops of rain on the roof. Everything once broken, lost, or burned away was now being mended by a love that needed no vows and no proof. The next morning, as Lisbon welcomed the dawn, Café de Lua opened earlier than usual. On the window table sat 2 steaming cups of coffee and a small note. They say happiness never lasts, but I believe if we keep searching, it will always wait somewhere between the light and the sea breeze. Outside, a couple left the cafe. He in a black coat, that same steady gaze. She in a white dress, her hand laced in his. They walked down the cobblestone slope, their shadows merging into one under the sun. When the sea breeze swept through the streets, the church bells rang, as if the whole city smiled. No more mafia, no more darkness. Only two people who had once died, just to relearn how to live walking toward the light they had created together. She looked up at him and asked softly, "Do you ever think if I hadn't been at the hospital that night, would we have met?" He smiled gently. "No, because I'd have found you anyway, this life or the next." In that moment, Olivia knew nothing in this world was ever coincidence. Only souls who had lost each other finding their way back when they were finally brave enough to love again. The morning sunlight glowed on the cafe's glass window, illuminating the chalkboard sign Café de Lua, where lost souls find themselves again. And beneath it, a new line had been added in soft, careful handwriting. Some stories don't end. They just come home. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.